Welcome to the Leading Ladies podcast with international leadership coach, speaker, author, trainer, and your host, Fiona Mackay. The Leading Ladies podcast shares stories and advice from women around the world who have successfully navigated the glass ceiling. You'll gain powerful insights into strategies for cracking the glass ceiling, embracing your self-worth and value, and advocating for yourself and others. So please join Fiona for frank, courageous, and heartfelt conversations designed to take you on a journey to new levels of personal and professional success.
Welcome back, leading ladies and male allies. We have a really exciting guest for you here today. We have an astronaut wrangler. Christina Court was not only the manager for Apollo 11 teen astronaut Buzz Aldrin, she also ran his company for 10 years. Before that, she was a professional singer and ran a media company. And she used that knowledge to work with Buzz and elevate his brand and public awareness. She now does that on a much bigger scale by promoting space and engaging people in a much more accessible way. She exec produced the last 5 galas at the Kennedy Space Center and co-founded The People's Moon, an experiential installation that has been showcased around the world and now resides at the Kennedy Space Center. Now, additional lover of space, Matt Higa, is also here today as my co-interviewer, co-presenter, whatever it is. And we're going to be talking to Christina about some of her experiences in the world of space and specifically around the beauty in being the outlier. Welcome, Christina.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks, Christina, for joining us here today. I say it all the time online, and just every time I meet one of the top 62 it's an honor and a privilege and a blessing to be, here speaking with you, getting to learn, one-to-one, closer, and even more distance now is closed digitally, from a profile to an actual face-to-face and actual put a voice to it, a name, make it live. So I'm just happy to be here. And thank you, Fiona, for letting us, use your platform and infrastructure to put this all together.
It's a really awesome cause. It's a really awesome cause for anybody that hasn't listened to the last few podcasts. Matt actually came up with the top women in aerospace and aviation to follow on LinkedIn. And so that is the women that we are interviewing right now, which is pretty awesome. Now, Christina, you have a really unique background. Tell me more about how you ended up working in space.
Yeah, I always say to people, you could not have predicted the trajectory of my life growing up in South Dakota to working with Apollo astronauts in a billion years. I was in a family band. I'm one of 10 children. I have 5 brothers, 4 sisters. Wow. And I grew up in a family band that was like the real live Partridge Family. I was on keys at the age of 12. My brother was 10 years old on drums. My sister was 16 on bass, and my dad on lead guitar. And we started this family band. And when I tell people that, they think it means we did that as a hobby. But no, I played in bars 4 to 6 nights a week, starting at the age of 12 years old, and had to get up and go to school every day and play in the bar every night. Half of my teachers were in the bar watching us play, and the other half of them didn't approve of kids being in the bar. I played my own prom. It was quite an interesting upbringing. And so after 10 years, when I was 22, I wanted more. I didn't want to just keep playing in bars and clubs forever. So I left my family band to move to Los Angeles. They kept going without me. One of my little sisters took my place in the band. And I went to LA to pursue my rock star dreams. And I had more success than most. I did get signed to Warner Brothers eventually. I made a record. I was singing background vocals on records for Ringo Starr and people like that. Wow. I was hanging out with Aerosmith. I was doing quite an amazing, when you look at it, it looks kind of crazy, even that part of my life. And I was also in between all of that doing assistant sound editing jobs and things in post-production and film and TV. and then ended up touring all over Latin America, singing backgrounds for major Latin artists and doing shows anywhere from like 15,000 people to 200,000 people, like gigantic shows. And so that was, me trying to pursue being a rock star, but it was also a very feast or famine lifestyle. Sometimes it was really, really wonderful, and sometimes you were flat broke, And so I ended up leaving that, and I ended up working for John Tesh, who was a media personality. He had a radio show and he used to be on Entertainment Tonight, and he was a musician. And I worked in his company, and he took me under his wing and taught me how to run the record label and production company and the radio show. And I loved that job, but I was working myself to death because I was running the company Monday to Friday. Then I would tour every weekend singing in his band and being the tour manager. So I worked every day for years, and I just couldn't keep doing it. And I finally decided I wanted to have a life because I just worked all the time. So I answered an ad in the Hollywood Reporter to work for Buzz Aldrin. And
awesome.
The funny thing about it is at the time, I thought, oh, this is perfect. Nice, boring job working for an old guy, probably reads the paper. Who knows what he does. But to me, it was like coming from managing concert tours and having this kind of intense, like always go lifestyle. I thought, oh, working for a 77-year-old guy is going to be a piece of cake, And honestly, I was chosen by his ex-wife because they wanted someone who knew how to handle media and PR and then all of his speaking engagements and appearances and stuff. So they wanted someone from entertainment to help with that. And to be honest, I just think his ex-wife really wanted to go to the Grammy parties and the Oscar parties too, and thought I could help with that, And so I went into this job thinking he'll die in a couple of years. I'll go do something else, and I would say this in front of people, and they would just use this in front of Buzz, and he'd say, "Joke's on her, I'm still around," And so what began as a very, to me, administrative job of doing a simpler job compared to what I'd done before turned into a responsibility. And also, obviously, beginning to realize that I was becoming a part of a circle of people, Apollo astronauts, and people in aerospace at a very high level, and being accepted in that world in a way that maybe if I had come from the engineering or science world, maybe wouldn't have worked. But because I had worked with rock stars, being around the Apollo astronauts was no big deal to me, And I think that's partially why I got accepted pretty quickly, was because I just treated them like normal people. To me, what was the big deal, It took me a while to really understand the significance, though, of the historical significance of being a part of this world.
Was there a tipping point, and what was that like for you to go from music management? And when did you start to really accept the importance and significance of what you were doing?
Yeah, I have to admit, for the first few years of working for Buzz, I just looked at it as a job. And I honestly still wasn't even looking at it as a long-term thing. And it just became a part of my reality. And then Buzz divorced his wife. He decided after he did Dancing with the Stars, because I had begun to influence him by getting him to do a making of rap video with Snoop Dogg. If you've never seen it, you must look it up. It's awesome. And we were doing a lot of more mainstream stuff like that. And he would say, I shouldn't be doing this. The astronauts won't like it. And I was like, who cares? You don't need to convince those guys. You need to convince people like me who actually love space, but I didn't know what was going on, And so he began to do more of that. He did Dancing with the Stars, which kind of gave him a whole new lease on life and made him really, really famous again to a new generation. And so I got married during all of this, and I got pregnant. And when my daughter was 5 days old, he divorced that wife. And I had to pick up his life and help him start over with a newborn baby, which was its own challenge, and start helping him start over with his life, which is how I took over running his company. And so it took a bit for us to get into it, but finally we were getting a rhythm and we were doing lots of really cool things. And I always say my rock star lifestyle prepared me for life, with a rock star astronaut, because we started doing appearances where we'd go to China for a day, we'd go to Brazil for a day, we'd go to Australia for a day and come back. And people would be like, how can you do this? And I'm like, honestly, if we weren't flying in business or first class, there's no way we'd be able to handle it, because it's quite an intense thing to fly for 17 hours and then do an event and then come back. The tipping point, the part where I really began to realize what I was a part of, was Stephen Hawking's people had reached out several times, tried to arrange a meeting with Buzz, and this is still when he was with his wife, and she just didn't care, it was no priority to her. And so they had reached out to me again when I was running the company. We were coming to the UK and on to Italy, and then coming back to the UK for some events, space events and obligations. And so I said, oh, this would be a good time to meet Stephen Hawking finally. And so I arranged this meeting with Stephen Hawking. We did this actual aviation world record simulation of flying around the world as a charity event for a company called Aerospace that teaches physically disabled people how to fly. And so we did that in the morning. They're based in the UK. And then we went to Stephen Hawking's office in Cambridge. We drove to Cambridge and then visited him in his office. And then we went back to London and did a BBC radio panel in this theater right by BBC Studios. This is the kind of crazy schedule we would do like a charity event and do that kind of a meeting and then go do another event in the evening. Anyway, after the BBC thing we did, this Harvard professor who had been on the panel said to me, so what did you guys do today? And I said, oh, we did this charity event in the morning, and then we went to meet Stephen Hawking for the first time in his office, and then we came and did this. And he was like, I'm sorry, what? And I said, yeah, that's what we did. And he was like, you're a part of history now. And I said, oh, I'm nobody. And he's like, no, you just told me that you just took Buzz Aldrin to meet Stephen Hawking for their first ever meeting. And I said, yes. And he goes, you don't understand what I would give to be in that room. You need to start taking this seriously. You have a responsibility to humanity to be paying attention to this. And so I was like, geez, kind of like, okay. But that was the point. Then I realized, wow, I guess he's right. I'm not thinking about this. I'm going all over the place with this very historical person who did something that changed the world, and introducing him to another person who changed the world, who, that significance of what that was, just it took a while for it to hit me. And after that, I realized I needed to start paying more attention about what was going on. But the other thing, just to go how I started becoming passionate about space, is obviously I was in very high level meetings with very high level space industry executives and people at NASA and heads of space agencies. And I began to hear a lot of things and absorb a lot of information, and realizing what I was learning on the job constantly about the space industry. But the bigger thing that really touched me was the way that people were affected by the first moon landing. When people every day, at every meal, walking into a hotel, getting on a plane, everywhere we went, someone would stop and say, I've got to tell you where I was when you walked on the moon. And most of the time it was somebody who was a kid who was like, I'll never forget it. It's my clearest childhood memory of sitting there watching this, and those stories really began to get to me. And for the astronauts, that's just their reality. So they'd be like, oh, that's nice, But then I began to realize, wow, I'm the keeper of the memories. I'm actually the one who's starting to pay attention to these things, and absorb these heartfelt stories people would tell. I began to record them. I've got quite a few of them, of people talking about what this meant. And I realized that the first moon landing on Apollo 11 is the first and probably only time ever that the world stopped, waited in anticipation, and then celebrated a human achievement. Not after a tragedy, but a positive human achievement that the world joined together and was proud of. And that's a moment that we don't understand in this generation. And so that, being the witness to all of that, really began to get to me and think, wow, I have a responsibility here. This is more than just space is cool, space is fun, it's technologically cool. What to me is more powerful is the impact it's made on people's hearts, and what it triggers within people of possibility. And so that's what really changed me and started making me think, what could I do to try to light that spark in other people and get them interested in space as a representation, I guess, of possibility of the future, of what they could do for themselves. So that's really what changed my own heart and made me think, okay, I need to use this platform, use this experience, and do something good with it.
Wow,
Wow.
that's really, really beautiful. I'm like
I
sitting
was
here
gonna say
like
beautiful too.
feeling the
Beautiful
emotion.
was one I had too. And so like Astronaut Wrangler and Time Capsule, like you're a living time capsule in a way, in a sense.
Yeah, I mean, my favorite story, I'll just tell it really quick. And there's a bunch of them, but these ladies who had hired Buzz to give a speech in Tennessee, when they had us in the green room, they said, we finally have you and can tell you our moon landing memory. So they said, we were young girls in Turkey. We lived in a village with no running water, no electricity. Our mother couldn't read or write, and our father only had a 5th grade education, but he was committed to his daughters having a better life than they had. And so he wanted us to graduate high school and get a college degree. The week of the moon landing, their father bought a Grundig radio, and they said everyone from their village came to listen to the moon landing coverage on this radio. 300 people in and out of their house and kids out on the lawn. They said, when we heard that you landed on the moon, we felt like we did it. And we hugged and cheered and cried. And we were so proud of what humans had accomplished. And they said, when everyone calmed down, they went out to the grass and people sat down on and looked up at the moon, and it was full. And I said, what were you thinking then? And they said, we realized we could aim higher. We could aim higher for our dreams. And so the older sister went on to get her PhD in quantum physics. And the younger sister got her MBA and has a successful company in California. And I was like, wow, like they just heard the moon landing. Like that just flipped the switch. That they didn't even get to watch it, but that was enough. The realization, that this impossible thing had been accomplished, made them aim higher for what they were going to do before.
Well, now you're making me think that the title of this podcast and with your story should be Aim Higher for Your Dreams, because you certainly seem to be living, breathing proof of that. Wow. Well, it almost seems a little bit odd to do this right now after such an amazing story, but I just want to take a moment to recognize our sponsor of the Leading Ladies podcast, GM Defense. I'd like to take a moment to pause and recognize GM Defense, our sponsor that helps make this podcast possible. GM Defense is driving the future of military mobility by leveraging the best-in-class capabilities of General Motors for unmatched innovation, proven performance, and breakthrough lifecycle economics. Learn more at www.gmdefensellc.com and watch out for new job posts as they expand and strengthen their team. You can also follow them on Twitter and LinkedIn. The GM Defense team is amazing, and we are proud that they sponsor the Leading Ladies of podcast. And back to today's guest. So, Christina, absolutely loved your stories so far today, and I actually want to hear more. And I'm probably going to not spend too long on today's topic, but can't not acknowledge it. So we talk about, I almost don't feel like you are an outlier. I feel like you are an insider, but in a way, as you became more interested in space and you were spending time with, the senior executives in senior space companies, did you ever feel like you were an outlier? And if so, how did you deal with that?
I guess in some ways I still feel like an outlier a bit because often when I go into meetings and stuff, people will say, well, what's your PhD in? And I'm like, I don't have a fancy degree. I just have a PhD in getting stuff done. I'm really good at accomplishing things and I'm very resourceful. And if I don't know how to do it, I can figure out who knows how to do it or who can help me do it, And I'm not afraid to ask for help, which I think is a big, if you want to give advice, that's one thing I would say to people is don't be afraid to ask for help, because I've gotten pretty far with asking people for help. And people want to help, they feel pretty proud of being able to impart their wisdom or their whatever, if you ask them for help. But I mean, I will say this, I'm sure there have been people in some of those meetings who thought, why is this girl in this room? But then again, I think that because I've always been pretty okay with being in those rooms and not being intimidated by anybody, that they've respected me more too because of it. I was in a meeting one time at the Korean Space Agency with an astronaut, and I was just accompanying him. So I sat in the side and he was trying to convince them to do something. And then at one point I said, hey, I'm producing events for the Apollo 11 50th anniversary. Just occurred to me, I'd love to get the perspective of you in Korea who are planning an orbiter mission to the moon. And the guy who was the head of the lunar orbiter mission, the chief engineer, said, well, I can't say that Apollo 11 had any impact on my life. But my father has talked about it. My whole life has talked about how Apollo 11 was just so amazing. And I said, I'm sorry, hold on. Your father talked about Apollo 11 your whole life. You became an engineer. You are now the chief engineer and head of the lunar orbiter program for the Korean Space Agency. And you don't think it made an impact on your life? And he was like, you're a CEO. You're a CEO, aren't you? And I was like, well, I'm just saying. Like, to me, that's the clearest indication of how it impacted your life, is the fact that your father was so. I mean, I think, there have probably been times where I've spoken up in meetings that people thought, oh, she should not be talking. But I also think, what have I got to lose? What are they going to do? Kick me out of the room? Especially when I was with Buzz, in official capacity, what are they going to do? Kick me out of the room? I mean,
Yeah. I
but
love
I mean,
that. He's the whole nothing to lose. I mean, I like, one of my favorite sayings is, I'd rather regret doing something than regret not doing it. And so the nothing to lose, I love that. And it sounds like you just went into those rooms and really owned it. And I like the way that you in a way, in that story, you sat silently on the sidelines and then came in with this lightning bolt comment. I love that.
Well, and I think that's what people don't expect sometimes from women. And I think a lot of women stop themselves from saying what they think. And I'm a little bit less afraid to do that, because I just feel like, I don't know what's going to happen. Somebody going to get mad at me? I don't
Yeah, no, that's great. We were talking about that in the last interview when we were talking to Erica as well. It kind of came up as like, what can women do, or like how do people perceive, like that reaching out and breaking those barriers there. So like the same thing came up as like a lean in, sort of like, just do it. Like, what is there to lose?
There's a quote by somebody who said, if there's not a chair at the table, grab a folding chair and like pull it up or whatever, like to the table, find something to sit on, because that's the thing. We can't wait around for somebody to invite you. You just have to be part of it, And to be honest, I do think that a lot of times, people who maybe seem kind of macho actually respect you when you step up like that,
Yeah, I mean, when I'm coaching my male clients, I'm very direct and I call them out on a lot of their stuff, and they almost enjoy it. Maybe not in the moment, but definitely later on. Yeah. And so since we're on the topic of gender, as you know, this is the Leading Ladies podcast, and we talk about breaking glass ceilings. Did you feel like there was a glass ceiling in the arena that you were working?
There absolutely is a glass ceiling, especially in the aerospace world. Now, was there for me? I never felt like there was for me, but like I said, I felt like I rubbed shoulders with some pretty high profile people. So I never felt uncomfortable in any of those rooms ever. And I think that's a combination of, because I had done so many, kind of amazing things already. And then also, frankly, I have 5 brothers, and my dad never, ever treated the girls differently. And so, I guess I kind of always felt like I could hold my own with 5 brothers, but I will say this, I became much more aware of the imbalance when I started asking people for their, what Apollo 11 meant to them. I was struggling to find women, and I realized, wow, this is a very male dominated thing, this video I put together, and I had some really high profile people like Tom Hanks and Tim Allen and Stephen Colbert and Stephen Hawking and Neil deGrasse Tyson and Bill Nye and John Travolta. And I mean, I had like an incredible array, but all men. And that began to really, that's why the women in Turkey story is so impactful to me. But then I started meeting some of the female pioneers in aerospace and hearing their stories also about how they were the only woman for like 10 years in their field or in their office or whatever. And the unfortunate thing is a lot of times they would say, we were afraid to rock the boat. It took a while for us to get accepted and we didn't want to rock the boat, but now we wish we had rocked the boat. Now we wish we had spoken up more or made way for more women, because we didn't expect it to be still just me, the only woman in the room for 10 years,
So after talking to so many different people for so many years and like literally being like a living time capsule as well as Astronaut Wrangler, I'm sure you have a ton of great memories that have like been passed on to you. What is one of your favorites that you've received? And maybe particularly from the women, since they were so further and few in between. What's one of your favorites of those?
When I was looking for female pioneers, I met Joanne Morgan. She was the first female engineer at Kennedy Space Center. And she was the only woman there for 10 years. And she said it took her so long to get accepted that she didn't want to rock the boat. And she just wanted to, she was happy, she was good. She ended up being the only woman in the room when Apollo 11 lifted off in launch control. There's a very iconic photo, if you can find it, of her being very clearly the only woman surrounded by all these guys. And she said she kept being asked to do interviews and she turned it down because she didn't want to stick out and she didn't want the guys to give her a hard time. But in 1972, she finally decided to do an interview. And she got hundreds of letters in the mail from little girls who said, wow, I didn't know girls could be engineers. And she said, I realized I made a mistake. I should have done the interviews, even if the guys gave me a hard time. I didn't realize what the impact would be on young people and also I didn't think I'd be the only woman in the room for 10 years. I thought eventually there would be more women since they welcomed me, eventually there would be more. And it took much longer than she thought it would take.
Yeah, that definitely touches on a lot of things we've talked about recently. Like, I mean, particularly being an outlier, but also it sounds like her story sort of mimics your transition where she had a moment of like that tipping point of recognizing that she's a part of something and it like is impactful as well. So definitely like being an outlier can contribute and like, stepping out of your, comfort zone. So like, I mean, it seems like an obvious answer to me, but like, I mean, do you see like the benefit to businesses, like hiring outliers and like getting some cross-disciplinary things going?
Absolutely. I think that companies, especially in corporations, get stuck with hiring the same type of people who think the same way as them. And I think there's a huge benefit to bringing a fresh perspective, a fresh set of eyes. That's the thing with the space world. A lot of them are like, we're doing big, important things. We're building lunar landers. And I'm like, yeah, nobody knows it. So meanwhile, nobody has any idea you guys are doing these things. And then you're wondering why you can't get more support from the public. You need more people like me who are trying to help, raise awareness and look at it in a different way than you look at it. Because I've had researchers say, we don't need to worry about raising money. We focus on our research. I'm like, where do you think the money comes from? You need the public to care in order to get money into what you want to do. So that's one thing I think that is helpful, to have someone like me who came from a totally different world to get fresh eyes on it. I think every company in any field could probably benefit from that sort of thing, to get them out of ruts of dealing with the status quo and doing things the way they've always done it. You need some disruption.
Yeah, one of the terms that I really dislike is, culture fit versus, I really much prefer culture add. And I used to actually have a manager, and when he hired people, he would purposefully be like looking at the way they behave, what they did, what their background was, and picking somebody who was different. He had these ideas of, different roles people could play on teams. And I think a lot of us could really benefit from companies with that approach. Well, Christina, we could interview you all day, And I wish I'm kind of like, I should just do like a 3-hour podcast with you, because I just imagine like the whole 3 hours would be awesome. But I'm not sure my editor would like me for that. But I think, Matt, do you have any more questions before we wrap things up?
Yeah, it's my favorite question, and since I got a space person here to talk about it with, I just real quick. I mean, because I know, like Fiona said, we could go on for 3, 4, 8 hours. I mean, probably the rest of our lives. But something that I've been obsessed with recently, because I'm trying to design one, is the secret. Is I'm trying to design an astronaut training program. So trying to crowdsource and crowdfund that. If you were in charge and you have experience with an astronaut, and if you were also trying to make it an all-female crew and beat a couple other people, Elon, Bezos, and China to Mars, how would you design a program? Or like, what would you do differently that's already been done? Or, like, what do you think is the next step? Or like, what needs to happen for that to happen?
Well, one thing I will say about the commercial space, explosion that's kind of going on right now is it's kind of showcasing, or at least hopefully allowing, this idea that you don't have to be an engineer to go to space, because that's pretty much one of the main requirements when you apply at NASA or the European Space Agency, is that you have to be an engineer, which is super outdated information, frankly. And you don't have to be a pilot either, because even all the pilots I know would say, when you go to space, all of that goes out the window. It's a totally different navigation. You don't have airspeed, you don't have any of this stuff, and all of the spacecraft are automated anyway at this point. So it's funny you say this, because I've had many conversations with it, the different types of people you should have on a mission. You should have a doctor, you should have a nurse. What happens if you burst your appendix when you're in space or something, or you have some dental emergency or something? You should have a computer tech. You should have somebody who can fix the computers. You should have somebody, having an engineer is fine. Have an engineer, have a scientist, have all this, but having also musicians or people who deal with, mental health or whatever, I think all of that would be amazing, to have that array of minds and talents and expertise in space, instead of just having this narrow category of engineers and pilots or whatever. That's outdated information, first of all. Second of all, one thing I learned recently from astronauts, which is really interesting, is they've said a lot of people, when they come with astronaut training, astronaut interviews, is if you've gotten to the room, you have the qualifications. But they said everybody's always trying to fit within what they think NASA wants. And what actually at that point they're looking for is, what is your personality like? Am I going to be able to stand being cooped up with you for 6 months? And they just want people to be themselves. And the ones who are themselves are the most likely to be chosen. The ones who are themselves and aren't super annoying. So, and then of course the thing, if I was going to pick my first crew, man, I would love to try an all-female crew sometime, because as we talked about when we weren't recording, the next mission to the moon on Artemis says we're going to put the first woman, and it was saying the next man to the moon. And I was like, why does it have to be the next man? Why can't it just be 2 women to go on the next mission? Why does a man need to go on the first mission? 12 men had walked on the moon, So I'm not sure I'm going to get very much traction with that. But honestly, I'm like, I don't understand. There's plenty of female astronauts. They're qualified. Why can't you send 2 women this time? Anyway.
Right.
Yeah, all-female mission to the moon. I love that. That sounds super cool.
And to Mars too.
And to Mars too.
It came up on LinkedIn recently because of the recent Virgin Galactic, Richard Branson and Jeff Bezos race to space and everything, and Richard Branson being on the moon. And I saw on LinkedIn some people having a conversation about should these people be called astronauts? And I just, as the astronaut Wrangler, I mean, I have a take, and I think maybe we are probably aligned on that now, hearing more of what you've said. But what's your take on that? It seems a little bit like gatekeeping to me, to like keep it as like astronaut is just engineers and scientists, but when we need to be encouraging others to go out there. But what, with the new commercial and the tourist, type of, race to space and honoring the past, and then our heroes, Buzz Aldrin, hey man, he's our guy, you think the new people should be called astronauts as well? Or is that a more open term and more people can kind of apply that?
Buzz had a very and some other astronauts too, that astronaut is a professional term. And you wouldn't call somebody a doctor who does CPR or something like that. Buzz's take, and I absolutely see his point of view, was that you're a space traveler. You know, when you fly in a plane, you're not the pilot, you're a passenger. So I know there's been some discussion about being space passengers or Virgin Galactic calls them future astronauts. And it really bothers some of the astronauts because that was a profession that they trained for and that they're more qualified to be. And to just call somebody who gets to go up in a 12-minute suborbital flight an astronaut, kind of in the minds of some of the astronauts demeans the role or the profession that they all trained to be, because they trained for many years. They trained to live in the environment of space. I mean, there are a lot of people who say, fine, just let them be called astronauts. What's the big deal? You know, and so I think it's just a matter of, at some point though, what are you going to have, 1 million astronauts? Probably. It will probably change at some point, but I don't know. I guess I'm kind of torn, and I do see the astronaut point of view, that to some of them, it demeans the role of their professional, title of astronaut, as opposed to someone who's traveling as a passenger on a spacecraft to space. Buzz just thought they should just be called space travelers.
Awesome. Yeah, no.
What do you think? What is your take?
I'm open on both. Like I mentioned, like I want to respect the past. And like there's definitely a difference between what Buzz did and what the most recent did. Like there's no doubt. But I love what Buzz says about it being a space traveler, but that's also kind of how, like, if you break down the etymology of the word astronaut, it's literally just star sailor, which is essentially the same thing. It seems like the word itself, and words are powerful. But I think, in a time that we're supposed to be encouraging more people to get into the industry, like if they want to call it, like if what gets them into it and what gets more people excited about moving out to space and pursuing all these different endeavors and getting involved, if, I'm fine, I'm including them, but like, there's definitely a distinction between like the scientists and engineers in like specific training of what they did. And I think they'll forever be remembered that way. They're heroes. They're the first astronauts, and I think that'll be the distinction there. But at a certain point, and we may be at that inflection point now where we need astronauts, is kind of what I'm thinking, is like, we need people who want to go to space. And I think maybe in the spirit of the term astronaut, that's really what that means. Like somebody who wants to go to space and like sail the stars. Let's navigate that and go out.
Yeah, that's one thing I do have to say, is that people will ask me, aren't astronauts the elite humans? And I said, nah, they're just as flawed as the rest of us. But they are willing to take the risk. And that's what sets them apart, is that they're willing to take the risk to go do this thing that is dangerous. And there are a lot of people who are very smart who would never do that. There are also lots of smart astronauts who aren't that smart who've done it. So it's being willing to take the risk, I think, that really sets them apart.
Now, speaking of taking risks, final question today would be, there's a lot of young women out there that are perhaps thinking, I'd like to work in space, but I'm a bit of an outlier, I'm not cool enough. What would your advice be to those young women or young girls that are curious but still feel like they're an outsider?
I think any woman or girl should apply for every single job, everything, because we have a bad habit of disqualifying ourselves from the start by not even applying. And in that way, I will say I'm a little bit different. I heard a statistic that said when a woman looks at a job posting, they feel they need to fit 100% of the criteria before they apply. If a guy looks at that same criteria and only fits 30% of it, he thinks, I'm perfect for this job. And that's the women have to start thinking, I can do this job. I can learn how to do that. And that's the way that I am. I think I could do that. I could totally do that. I can learn those things. And so I say, apply for every job, because what have you got to lose? If you don't get it, you wouldn't have got it anyway if you didn't apply, but you might actually get the job. And you might actually be the person that they want. And so that's where I think women and girls have to train themselves to just go for it every time. There might be a moment of disappointment, But there's a line in the Apple TV show Ted Lasso that I love so much, which is be a goldfish. A goldfish has a 5-second memory. Be a goldfish. You'll be happy again. Forget about it and go and be happy. That's what, be a goldfish. Just go for everything. Try for everything. And in the process, you'll probably learn something even if you didn't get it. And you might adjust, and then next time you get it. You know.
Oh, I love that. One of my favorite words is the word yet. And so when people ask me, have you written a book? I haven't written a book yet. Have you done this? I haven't done that yet. Yeah, I know that I can do it. And I guess I'm a little bit like you in that regards. I don't know, maybe it was because I spend so much time like hanging out with my dad when I was a kid and I thought I could do anything. But yeah, every time I have those moments of doubt, and say, I can't do that. I can't do that yet. I will learn how.
Well, there's a Richard Branson quote, which I love, which says, if someone asks you in an interview, if you know how to do something and you haven't done it yet, say yes, and then go learn how to do it. And that, I thought, man, that's the epitome of my life.
Well, I wish that we had longer today. I would love to hear about your entire life, because seriously, from the moment you were born to this day, it sounds like a pretty amazing life. And I just so appreciative of all your advice and sharing your stories today. So for women and male allies that are listening, remember, there's a lot that you can bring by being the outlier. Say what you think more. You've got nothing to lose, and aim higher for your dream. Aim higher, and make Christina proud. Make all the leading ladies and male allies proud.
Make all of us proud.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
Thank you for listening, everyone. We hope you now have additional tools and insights for creating your own cracks in the glass ceiling. If you think this will inspire and help others, please share this episode on your social media and leave your comments on MckayUnlimited.com/podcasts. For more tips and support as you embrace your journey through the glass ceiling, please join our community Facebook group at leadingladiesofFB.com.